Well, hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. We are here to talk yet again about Terry and his wonderful piece that he's put together, his mini series, "The Most Dangerous Man in America," and it's so timely now. This is this week. Uh, Donald Trump was convicted of felony on 44 counts, I think.
30,
Anyway, 43,
34.
34. Oh, got it reversed. 34. Okay. Anyway, a lot. So and that's kind of what this whole piece is about. And of course, spoilers all over the place on this thing because we already did an intro to it where we didn't do any spoilers. This is different. This is kind of re-looking at it. And so we're assuming you've seen all four parts or heard all four parts. So if you haven't, make sure you go and do that first and then listen to this. But this is sort of a culmination podcast where we can just sort of talk about where the story went and things. And I think it'll be interesting to do that. Um, it's certainly it's just interesting how the timing just sort of all fell together that Terry released it and then what it got released the last episode maybe 2 weeks ago or something, a week and a half ago or something like
Yeah,
that.
something. It was a week ago Wednesday.
Yeah. So, and then this verdict comes out, which makes it be certainly Roy. I think in the other podcast, I may have cut that piece out, but Roy mentioned that it may be happening again. We don't know, that we have a, a convicted felon running for uh, for the presidency, um, and in the case in this case we're going to be talking about today, the person was actually in jail as they were running. Uh, Trump gets sentenced in halfway, I think July 11th or something like that. So then we'll see what's going to happen to Trump. I mean, people are saying that I've been listening to and things, the lawyers and things are saying that it'll probably be probation, uh, but maybe sometime with they could even push it with an ankle bracelet sort of thing and so forth and be stay in his house, stay in his home for a certain amount of time. Who knows? It can be. There's so many things it could be. At most, it could be 4 years that he would have to serve. Anyway, let's go over to Terry and just find out, Terry, what do you think about all this and how it ties in and that your centerpiece of your story is getting mentioned in the news all over the place. Yeah, Terry, what are your thoughts on this whole thing and how it all the timing how it all fell together?
Well, the New York Times, shortly after the verdict was announced, published an article that began, quote, "Not since Eugene V. Debs campaigned from a prison cell more than a century ago has the United States experienced what is now happening." I mean, I couldn't have written a better uh, promotional piece myself. Uh,
Exactly.
but it is amazing to me how timely our play turned out to be. I mean, we knew that it would be relevant because uh,
Right.
Donald Trump was being charged and then prosecuted, but we didn't know how, of course, how it would turn out
Right.
when we were writing the play. And it is extraordinary, of course, but at the same time, our play, the Debs play, is about more than just Donald Trump. It's about the
Right.
mood in America, the changing nature of um, well, of the labor movement. Debs was the person who established the Socialist Party in the United States, and and it was also a glimpse into how the justice system works or worked anyway at that time. But even now, there I'm sure are some similarities to how people are prosecuted for for high crimes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and there's no way you could know when the trials were going to happen and because that was so up in the air for so long as to if any of them would get done before uh, the presidential elections or not. It looks like this is the only one out of the four, I guess, that is going to be completed by that time. Um, and then there was no way we could judge how fast they were going to come back with a verdict either. It was very quickly. But anyway, I thought we'd go over to Kathy. What are some of your thoughts on the three additional pieces? We talked about the first piece already. You can talk about the whole thing. You can talk about the three final episodes, whatever you want to point out.
Well, there are so many parallels and contrasts. This is such I'm so grateful to Terry and his co-author. This is such a rich subject and so many different ways to compare and contrast it with the current day situations. What we might say we have tremendous sympathy today for Eugene V. Debs and the sort of the very bogus nature of the high crimes and misdemeanors he supposedly the trumped up charges against Debs versus what Trump supporters would think of the charges against him. Debs comes out as a very moral man who, I mean, both speaks his mind but stands up for what he thinks is right. And one of the aspects that interests me the most historically that the series captures is the change of heart of the chief accuser, the newspaper reporter who comes to see the light, changes his mind about the fittingness that he made a big mistake. Oh, if we're gonna have some spoilers here, yeah. He changed his mind about his leadership role in getting Debs to be prosecuted. And in a way, I think that's a wonderful American story. That it's, that's hope for me for the future, is that possibly people can change their minds about things and realize what's most important and right and fair. We sure need that today. So
yeah, take additional information and modify your views slightly or majorly. Anyway, yeah, no, I agree with all that, and I just I love the presentation, the way it's done. I think it unfolds really nicely and gets you wanting to listen to each additional episode. Also, if somehow, some way, you're listening to this and going, I don't even know what they're really talking about. Certainly go check out, it's the most recent dropped 4 episodes, because it's a 4-episode miniseries. Over on Terry's site, which is Imagine Air Theater, imagine-air-theater.com, I think. And certainly he has 11 other episodes that are standalones that are delightful and on every possible genre you could think about, whether it's science fiction or Western or any, the only the consistent piece with them is sort of the Twilight Zone-esque like twist at the end, or where they tie into current, they're echoes of our current times usually in some way or another, and they're brilliantly written, just wonderfully acted, and delightful. I love them, and so get a chance to experience all those. And certainly I wouldn't just listen to the Debs one. The Debs one's fantastic, but there's so many other good ones mixed in there too. So, and let's go with John. And what are your thoughts, John?
Originally, I was going to joke that I didn't realize it was any parallel to Trump. It's just a story about Debs. They don't even mention Trump. But I know when we talked to your co-writer Terry, we cut some of that out for spoilers, right? But one of the things that he mentioned was when he brought this to you, it was this idea of, well, there's a potential, that we could, have another president running from jail, and here is this actual historical incident of somebody running for president from jail, and just how neat that tied in. So I think it's really amazing that here, right after it drops, we have the conviction, and so it's so timely, like you say. And hopefully it gets more interest, for people who might not have listened to a Debs documentary to now say, oh, Debs, I'd like to hear more about that story. So I think that's great. So, if there's listeners and somebody who'd be interested, I would recommend sharing it, because it is fun. And like you say, Terry, it's not it's not really about Trump, even though there's that parallel. It's really a really interesting historical biography. So that's what I enjoyed most about it.
Agreed. And as you pointed out, I will wholeheartedly agree with that. That I was last time we were pushing because Terry. Oh, and I need to ask this of Terry too. But anyway, that we were pushing to because Terry had a Kickstarter campaign going, and I wanted to. I'd like to know if they reached their goal or not. But the big push on this one, I think, would be sharing it with your friends, neighbors, everybody you can think about, because they're hearing Debs's name. I also, even after the conviction came down this last week, um, I didn't think even the news would think to connect the two together. I thought it was too old and they wouldn't, but they are. I mean, so Debs's name is getting mentioned all over the place, and to have this piece that's out there, I don't even know if there's many other things on it. I think they mentioned there was some book that was written about it at some point or something, but I don't think there's a lot about it. And this is one of the, I mean, the main way people consume podcasts and they like these audio presentations of historical things, especially, murder cases and so forth. In this case, it's not that, but it's something equally interesting. And so I think a lot of folks would be interested in hearing this. Terry, anyway, your Kickstarter, where are you at with that? Did it make it, or
Well, we're having our conversation on June the 1st. I imagine it'll be sometime after today by the time this is out in the world.
Correct. I think I can get it out tomorrow, but definitely by Monday. But the thing is, I think it closes on the 3rd or something, doesn't it?
I think it's the 2nd, actually. I believe tomorrow.
Okay.
June
This is going to be so helpful to you, Terry.
Well, I don't know if it's in the morning or in the afternoon. So if this went out early enough, it could have an impact. But as we are speaking, we have already reached our goal.
Oh, good.
But if we won't know until it actually closes whether that's the case, because these are pledges. We don't know.
Oh, okay.
We won't know until actually the very end of the run.
Well, do you have enough that's like, do you have just about the exact amount, or did you?
No, we have more.
by
We have more than we need,
Okay.
assuming everybody comes through with how much they've pledged.
Well, good.
So I'm encouraging people to continue joining our Kickstarter campaign, in part because if we do exceed our goal, that will also go to help
Sure.
pay for not just this episode, but future episodes.
Well, I'll
it's
tell you
all
what, and I will get this ready and out tomorrow.
great.
So it's out tomorrow. I may, if I somehow get my act together enough to get this out this afternoon or something, then I'll do that. But I'm going to parade, and I refuse to not go to the parade with my family. So that's happening. After the parade, I will celebrate the parade by coming home and getting this thing out the door. But yeah, I'll put it on my podcast and I'll put it on my YouTube channel, and so people can get it multiple ways. And then hopefully they go and check your Kickstarter, which I'll link to in the show notes for wherever I'm posting this. So go down to the show notes, link there. If it's still accepting donations there, do that. I'll also link to Terry's Patreon, because if you can't do the Kickstarter because it's too late, then just go to his Patreon. Will they allow you on the Kickstarter if people go and it's too late? Can you link there to your Patreon, or do they not allow that?
I don't think so, but I think we have our website on the Kickstarter.
Okay, which links to your Patreon from
and
your
that
website.
will take you to either buy me a coffee or
yeah. Sounds good. But I'm glad you made that number. I was really concerned that you wouldn't make that. So that's good that you got the Kickstarter if all the pledges come through. If you pledge, make sure you follow through.
And it's just to pay the actors. Neither Roy, my co-author, nor I are getting any of this. It's just to pay the actors.
Which is as it should be. So there we go. It'd be lovely to get enough to pay you guys too. but just like I say, a delightful story, entertaining, surprising. You don't know what directions it's going to go. Each episode sort of takes you further, but also takes you around different ways. I written very nicely and acted very nicely as well. So
I don't know. Hope, have you heard any of the Debs play yet?
I have not. But I definitely am going to check this out now because I love, like, like everybody said, like this sounds like a great biography. I listen to biographies all day long, every day.
yeah, you will
And
very much like it as an old time radio
yes,
listener and
yes,
everything. It's perfect.
I love interesting campaign stories. I seek them out as like I have a vote for Gracie
Yeah.
shirt on today. But yeah, I love it. And um I'm sure if I was still in a journalist, I'd be all over
Yeah.
that right now.
And just so you know, going in and the listeners know too, it's not long. I mean, you're talking if you combine all the episodes, some of the episodes are as short as like 12 minutes or so, and then the longest ones are like 18 or something. So I think the whole thing combines to be maybe an hour's worth of time to listen to everything, maybe a little more, hour and 10 or something, but something like that. But
Oh,
it's not a huge commitment on anyone's part to listen to this whole thing.
I wanted to ask Terry a question. Did you all, are there any recordings of Debs's voice
I
of
wish
him giving his speeches? I was just curious.
I wish there were. There are recordings of his speeches, but they were recorded by actors.
Okay.
And in fact, even more recently, Mark Ruffalo read one of his speeches, and Bernie Sanders read one of his speeches in a documentary about Debs. There is also a Debs museum in Terre Haute, Indiana, where Debs was born. And there was an actor who, at the time of the speech that Debs gave, the one that got him into trouble, there was an actor who recorded the speech in a manner, in a style that very much, from what I've read, resembled the way Debs himself spoke. But as far as I've been able to determine, there aren't any recordings of him actually recording his own.
Well, listening to it, it seems like he must have been very charismatic and likable because it seems like he won a lot of people over just from his personality, if nothing.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. Terry, could you, after the show at some point, if you've listened to those speeches and or have uh, links to any of them, I'd love to, especially listen to the Bernie Sanders and the Mark Ruffalo ones.
Sure.
If you can share those, that'd be great.
Sure, I'll do that.
Okay. John, do you have any questions for Terry or anything about doing this or?
Well, I mean, I think we covered the content. I'd be interested in a little bit of behind the scenes in the production.
Sure. So, anything particular, John, you want to know about in the production, or?
Well, I know that you're not sitting in a recording booth with the actors. So how do you convey the sort of delivery you'd want or the performance you'd like to get out of the actors?
Most of that is on the page. I have lots of notes for the actors, giving them information about who these characters are. And I've even suggested some samples that they could listen to, not of Debs himself, but of others who were speaking in the style that we were looking for. I'm also extraordinarily lucky to have a casting director in the person of Stella Valente, who is also one of our regular actors in the Imaginaire Theater series. And she gives them guidance on how to perform. But you're right, John, we are not in a studio together. And so I'm not directing them. The only additional input that I have is when I get the files back, because everybody records their material individually, and then they send me the audio files and I edit them together. And when I get those files, if there's anything that's either a mistake or that isn't quite what I need, I will give them notes and they will redo things. But that's very rare, especially since, for the most part, throughout the series, throughout the Imaginaire Theater series, people haven't been getting paid. And so I didn't want to impose this additional burden on them of saying, you have to redo this. But every now and then there would be something that wasn't quite what I needed, and I would ask them to redo things. The only other thing I'll add to that is that to avoid having the actors redo things, every now and then I would grab a word or a phrase or a syllable even sometimes and insert it into the right spot. Um, one of the actors mispronounced mispronounced the name Debs. I think he said Dabs or Dibs at one point. And so I just took Debs that he had said correctly from somewhere else and substituted it. And you know,
Well, seamless.
it's
It's amazing what you can do with editing these days.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
the software is unbelievable, and so I was able to do things that ordinarily would be inconceivable. But just again to answer your question, John, no, we didn't. These were not directed as I might do in ordinary circumstances. And of course, this was all because of the pandemic. We weren't able to work together. That's why we created Imaginary Theater, so that people could record their parts wherever in the country, wherever in the world they were, send them to me, and then we'd put them together.
So how would you, because you did a stage play, with Ronald Reagan, and did you just write that, or did you direct that play as well?
Well, the Reagan play was written first, and then the pandemic came along, so I didn't want to just sit at home and wait for the virus to disappear. And that's when we started Imaginary Theater. Rather than directing the Reagan play, I hired a director who I knew, and then the actor who was going to play Reagan pulled out of the project. So the director became the performer.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it is, strictly speaking, it's self-directed. Now we're going to be staging it in a little more than a month and a half in Bakersfield, where I live. And since our actor lives on the East Coast, he'll be coming back, but only a few days before. So I'll be directing the setup and the technical direction, the technical, um, uh, I don't know what the right word is, but I'll be doing the technical directing, I guess is the
Yeah.
best way to put it, before he arrives. And so they're crediting me as the director of the play
Huh.
in this instance. It's a bit of a stretch. And I do give him lots of input, and we have a really great working relationship.
Well, I was just wondering how you would compare directing, or if only writing, for like a radio drama versus a stage play.
The stage play is, in the case of the Reagan play, the stage play is easier to direct because, as I said, Paul Messenger, who was our Reagan, uh, essentially directed himself. The radio play requires more input since I'm working with a group of actors and I'm having to combine what they do, so it has to fit together. And so they do require more input from me. And at the same time, beyond a certain point, there's not much I can do since I'm unwilling to have them do a lot of retakes. Early on with the radio plays, the actors would, on their own, give me several different takes on lines. So I would have some choices without having to ask them to do it differently. With the stage play, it kind of evolved over time, and it's continuing to evolve. That's the nature of most live theater, is that the writer has the privilege of watching the play every time and taking notes and giving feedback to the actor so that if we need to make changes, we can. And even if something doesn't work with a particular audience, we can use that as guidance for future performances. With the radio play, once it's done, it's done.
Right. Yeah. Huh. That's awesome.
True enough. Huh. It's so interesting how you do these things and putting them all together and things. Which I'm just curious because now you've done 12 of these imaginary theaters. Um, do you have, and you know, I feel so guilty asking this question because it's one that always Paul McCartney and John Lennon and George Harrison, when they get asked these questions, they always get miffed that people are asking them. So I won't phrase it quite the way most people phrase it when they're asking the question. But do you have any episodes that stand out as some of your favorites or that were the most enjoyable to make of them or anything? And
What a stupid question.
yeah.
No, 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 no. No, 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 no. A
Well, they
friend of mine
usually
once
ask
said
them,
there,
"What is your favorite song you've ever written or something?" And then they're like, "You can't do that." But I figure if you have favorites, and you can have them for different reasons, who knows? But anyway,
a friend of mine who's now passed away once said, there are no stupid questions, only stupid people.
yeah,
But no, it's a perfectly reasonable question. And it's difficult. It's like asking a parent who your favorite child is. But I do have a favorite episode, and it's the Gunsmoke episode. And we have a play called The Smoking Gun, which is
yeah,
clearly a takeoff on Gunsmoke. And it also had kind of a political spin to
yes,
it. And so it was fun to do for that reason. I like, as you pointed out, I like writing plays that comment to some extent on current events or our current society. But I also liked it because it was so much fun to do.
yeah,
Let's face it, when you work hard on these things, which we all do, our troupe, and when we're not making ton of money doing this, it's really just to cover our costs. If it's not fun, then why are we doing this? So it's got to be fun. And that one was a lot of fun, both to write and to produce.
nice. And I will say it's my favorite episode as well. Just as
Oh,
a
good.
listener, I've always loved that one. You'll notice when I talk about the episodes, I tend to mention that one quite a bit, the Western
Yeah.
episode. So I would love to see you revisit and do another. It could be completely different characters and everything, but I'd love to have another Western show up. That there are so many great ones that I just love. Let me ask this. I never thought about this, but I know John's listened to a lot of them or different ones. John, did you have any that you like struck you as, oh, I really enjoyed this one quite a bit?
Oh, if I knew I was going to get this question, I would have gone over them all again. But the one that immediately comes to my mind is the real estate, but it's planets. Just as like a science fiction concept. I thought that was fun.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go.
That
That's a
one's
good
called Fixer Upper.
Fixer Upper. That's right. That's right. And is that one of the more recent ones, I think?
That was the last one we did before the Debs play. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Well, that's probably why it's freshest in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And then which one? There's one where, oh gosh, I'm not even remembering the whole episode. I think it might have been the first one actually, is where someone's on a machine and uh at a hospital.
Oh, the coma episode,
Yes.
which is called I'm Not Dead Yet.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's it.
And I think that was our only mostly comedy episode. I think
Yeah.
that's accurate to say that it was pretty, if I had to categorize them as dramas or comedies, I would say that one was clearly a comedy. And the thing I liked most about that was that I got to work with an actor whom I had admired from seeing him on television. He did, I think, 3 episodes of my favorite TV show, my favorite sitcom, Barney Miller.
Okay.
He was obviously not part of the core cast, but he was a recurring guest star, and his name is Michael Alimo. He's a very, very, very funny guy, and it's a wonderful person. He lived next door to a relative of mine in L.A., and so that's how I met him. And when I was writing this episode, I had him in mind because I knew he would really be able to pull it off, which he did.
That's great. That's great. I really enjoyed that one too. So
And the rest of the cast, I don't want to slight anybody else. The rest of the cast was wonderful, and I've used uh, I think everybody who was in that episode has done multiple other episodes, including Paul Messenger, the actor who's playing Ronald Reagan, has done a number of episodes of Imagineer Theater, including that one.
well, I can't do this without throwing it to Kathy. Kathy, were there any that have stood out to you over time? Because I know you've listened to a lot of them.
Gosh, we mentioned a lot of them. Dare I ask what kind of ideas what your pie in the sky ideas for future subjects?
I'm working on this has been a long time in the works, and it's a combination of Western and science fiction. And I have a title for it, but I'm not sure we'll keep the title. And I keep changing the ending, so I don't yet know. If the ending changes, I oftentimes have to change the
Yeah,
parts leading
lead
up to
up
the
to it.
ending because
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
to get there, and it doesn't always work out. I also have an episode that I'm working on, which was inspired by current events, called Jury Duty. And I've never served on a jury. I've asked a lot of my friends who have been on jury duty what it's like. How does it work? How do you choose a four-person? And how do what's the process? And how does it feel? And are you sure of your verdict at the end of the process and so forth? So I think there's a play to be written about this, and I'm trying to cobble something together. But again, I don't know what the ending is yet. My longtime friend, he and I were uh, best friends in high school. I was best man at both of his weddings, and Mark Boyce, my script consultant, he would describe himself as my critic, uh, is very helpful, has been very helpful in every one of these episodes of Imaginary Theater. And he's always pressing me to decide the whole story before I start writing it. And it's not my style of work. I start writing, and I like to see where it goes and if it's going to lead to an actual play, an actual story. But with this one, as was the case with the Debs episode, and I again have to give full credit to my co-author, Roy Schreiber. We had to map these out and know exactly where we were going and how to get there. And so I'm learning
Okay.
how to be a better writer for for the purpose of helping the audience understand the story. It's one thing for me to know in my mind how it's working out, but if it doesn't work for the audience, it doesn't work, and that's just that.
Correct. Well, and that brings up something that's I think is interesting and ties into this one you've just done, which is a four-part episode. Um, what astounds me that I've read from a number of writers on a number of different television shows, especially if they're doing a cliffhanger that leads to the next season is the second half of the cliffhanger, is that they do something that is so scary to me. I can't believe they do it this way, but they'll write the first half and not have the second half written and wait until they come back from their hiatus or whatever. And then the first thing they do is write the second half of that two-parter. And I think it's one reason why so many of the two-part shows that I watch on television, the first part will be like excellent because it's so fun to write characters into situations. You're like, okay, how are they going to get out of this, and how are they going to get out of that, and create this great puzzle. But then solving the puzzle is not as interesting as creating the puzzle, and so the second half often won't be as good as the first half. In your case, it seems like you wrote them kind of all concurrently and they all worked together and you saw the whole picture before even the first one was you didn't release the first one and go, oh, now I'm going to write the second part. It was all ready to go. But have you ever thought about trying it that other way where you create a two-part thing and only write the first half and then come
Right.
back and revisit it for the second half? I don't know.
And in fairness, with the Debs play, because it was a biography of a real person,
Yeah,
and because both Roy and I were committed to sticking with the facts, we didn't invent things that were contrary to what actually happened.
correct.
We did invent things, but they were consistent with the truth.
Right.
And so we didn't have the luxury of waiting until next week to decide where we go from here. We knew from the beginning where we were going from here because that was the whole point. Whereas with the other plays, I love painting myself into a corner and trying to figure out how I'm going to get out of it. And the only other multiple part episode we did was the dolphin play.
Right.
And it was a two-parter. And I didn't know where we were going after part one. However, before we started recording, because I wanted to be sure the actors were going to be available for both parts,
Yes.
so I didn't send it out for casting until it was all done. But you're right. I didn't know after writing part one how part two was going to start, let alone how it was going to end. And I really enjoyed that. A friend of mine, another dearly departed friend of mine who was an actor, was on the radio. He used to do he was a disc jockey, but he was an entertainer also. And he would say that he would start talking and not know how he was going to finish a sentence. And he said it was like having a quick draw in the mirror against yourself and seeing if you could beat the guy in the glass.
Yeah.
And I like that analogy. It's a wonderful challenge to start writing something without knowing how it will end.
Oh, I agree. That would be interesting. I would think on the second episode of a two-parter, let's say, I could see a person start to get a little nerve-wracked with themselves, and that you write it and you're like, okay, that's not good enough. That doesn't hold up for the first part. I need to rewrite. And so it could be a little bit hairy there for a while of coming up with what you would think is a satisfactory conclusion to it. As for John, because he's a Star Trek fan, I mean, the most obvious episode I can think of is the Borg Best of Both Worlds, because that is
Yeah.
one where they famously wrote the first half, which was absolutely brilliant. And then the second half, probably, I think most people would say, isn't quite as good as the first half, but it is a pretty darn good second half. And it makes for what's considered one of the all-time classic Star Trek episodes. John, are you agreeing with that in some ways, or what do you think?
Yeah, and I like the good thing about doing it the way Terry does it is he gets the ability to write himself in a corner, but if he's really stuck, he could always go back and change the beginning, which they couldn't do in Star Trek. So really, he's got the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well done. Well said, my friend. But yeah, the whole writing process is something that just amazes me. I feel so envious of someone who, like Terry, who can write these things, because I assume all of us have tried to write something at some point and just went, oh my gosh, I'm just not a writer. For me, I'm not a writer at all. I'm a talker, so I come on and I just do my things, and everybody is always asking me, do you have notes that you write down and you refer to your notes? I'm like, no, I never have any notes. I just go with
You're
it.
just doing a quick draw against yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I do the quick draw thing, but in my head, I've always got kind of it laid out as the general direction I want to go. Even with like this conversation, I had bits and pieces I wanted to make sure I did, and I think I fit in almost everything I wanted to talk about. But I love that Terry allows us to do these. I love that Terry allows us to get into his head a little bit about how the process goes, because I never know who am I doing this for. I mean, I do it for us because we enjoy this. I hope some listeners like to get behind the scenes stuff. I love behind the scenes stuff. I often mention like that with Star Trek, where I've read what the writers have said, and I've heard interviews of the writers. I almost am as interested in hearing interviews of writers as I am of actors, and that's usually not the case. Most people, they want to hear Leonard Nimoy. They don't want to hear the person that wrote the Trouble with Tribbles episode or something. But I'd like to hear both sides. I like to hear how the writers came up with what they were doing. The one piece that I guess it brings up another question about is, Terry, you were saying that it's in the script, sort of how you want the actor to react to that line or whatever. I assume that's where, like, in parentheses next to the line, it says seething, or it says some clue as to how the or yelling at the top of his lungs, or something like that, that clues
Right.
the actor into how they're supposed to say the line. Is that kind of right?
There is that, and then I often at the beginning will have a section called author's note to describe, and even prior to that, in the cast list, I'll explain who these people are, whether
Okay.
they're real people or someone I've invented. But yeah, I try to give the actors some perspective on what I had in mind without obligating them to read a line in a certain way.
Sure.
I've been told often that actors do not like line readings from directors. No,
Correct.
don't say open the door, say open the door. Well, that's not my job. That's their job to interpret the line.
Right.
I can give them some clues about what I'm looking for, but not to tell. I mean, if I could read all the lines, I wouldn't need the actors.
Correct. Correct.
I'd be
But
doing a puppet show.
if they were to, the times I would assume where it's got to be done correctly is like if the follow-up line, if the person's supposed to be, we're having an argument and I say, why are you yelling at me? And the other person said the line, I'm really not happy with you right now. And it's like, then it wouldn't make any sense. So they're going to have to do bits and pieces that are.
But see, this is the joy of working with professional actors, which we do, is they have the whole script. And so they know who their scene partner is, even if that person is absent. They
Right.
still read the line in such a way that it will inspire the reaction or the response.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, it's just such an interesting process. And then like I've read, and I'm sure you don't do this or have to do this at all, but this is like for, a major TV series where they, like Barney Miller or something. Let's throw that out since you're a big Barney Miller fan, and so am I. But like Barney would have maybe where he has a 25-page treatment that describes his character, his background, what he is like, so that he understands the character. And that's 25 pages that some writer has written or whatever that never goes to air, never. It's just to give background about his character. And each character will have, maybe they don't have a 25-page treatment, maybe they have a 5-page treatment that explains to them what the motivation of their character, whether their character has a family, because all of that background helps the actor to develop the character in the correct way that the writers envision. And you sound like you do something similar, but I would assume it's just a few paragraphs or something. But how much do you give an actor of background? I mean, are we talking pages? Are we talking paragraphs?
No, not pages, certainly not pages.
Okay.
Sometimes a paragraph.
Okay.
And then, as I said, if the actor wants more input, I'm always open to answering questions, particularly on pronunciation. If there's an odd word, a name place, and so forth, I will provide that. In an audio play, that's all you have is sound, and so you can't do something with a wink or a nod or a gesture. And so I give them as much of that as I can. And with the Reagan play, my director / star did his own research, because again, we were talking about, we were portraying a real person. And so he listened to a lot of Ronald Reagan's speeches. He read, I don't know how much about Reagan's life. So even though it was all on the page, he could then take more and use that as inspiration for how he would read a particular line. And because, again, it was a much larger project than just a 10 or 15-minute audio play, we got to work together a lot on how a particular line or a particular scene would be presented. And as a matter of course, I defer to the actor for interpretation, unless something conflicts with what I know to be accurate, or
Right.
Or if something isn't working, I will say, as I see it, this is not working. Have you considered doing it a different way? Again, not telling them how to do it, just giving them feedback. Initially, I'm the audience,
Yeah, right.
I'm not just the writer. I'm the person who's consuming what the actors are producing. And so not only do I want to be there for them, they want to be there for me. They want me to be there for them too. They want to know how I react to what they're doing.
Okay. Yeah, and the last thing I'll throw on there is I just saw an interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger where he was talking about working with James Cameron, who wrote, I believe, wrote the original Terminator, and he was saying to James Cameron, "I'll be back." It doesn't sound right to me or whatever, and so I will be back is how I would say, is how I think I should say this. And he said, you're not the writer, and I don't tell you how to act, and you don't tell me how to write. I want you to say, I'll be back. So and he said he had no idea when he said it that it was going to become what it was. And he said, it shows you that the writers know what they're doing. So I thought that was great. But anyway, we'll leave it there. We have another show to cover and everything, but get out there. Certainly, I get to Terry's Kickstarter. Uh, Throw as much money as you possibly have in your bank accounts to that. And then if that's full, go to his PayPal page, and because he's doing wonderful work, and I just love it. So, and thanks everybody for all your contributions and everything. So, any last words, Terry? Or are we good to go?
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right, that's a good last word. So, out there, bye everybody.